And now, Connect with KB.
Hi, everybody. This is Kristin Beltzer, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Connect with KB. My guest today is currently serving on Michigan's 4th District Court of Appeals, but he has his sights on the Michigan Supreme Court in November. I want to welcome to the podcast Judge Brock Swartzle. Thanks for joining me, Brock. It's so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really enjoying being here.
Well, you know what? I had an opportunity. I will tell you that you are making the rounds because I heard you on NPR, and when you get to NPR, you're doing pretty big time. But I appreciate you coming on Connect with KB with me, and I want to start with the Brock Swartzle story. I always have my guest just kind of give that inside baseball look at who they are.
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me on. And the Brock Swartzle story, when a friend of mine one time asked me just about my background, and I said, you know what, I think I grew up in a Mellencamp song. I'm from a small town. My friends are small town. Probably going to die in a small town. So yeah, I grew up in Athens, which is just south of Battle Creek. Very tiny little farm village. But my dad's side grew up in Battle Creek. My mom's side grew up in Union City, and they kind of split the middle and moved to Athens. So I grew up there. A lot of good friends that I met in Athens. They're still my best friends. I've known them my entire life. Growing up, it's hard to know much about me if you don't know that I had a brother who passed away when I was 5, and then my father passed away when I was 14. And so, the real hero of my life would be my mom, because she raised, 3 kids basically all by herself after my dad passed away. But I also had the benefit of growing up in such a small town, because all of the parents of my friends seemed to kind of take over and watch out for me. So, they kept me out of trouble. They kind of smoothed things over with my mom when I would maybe do something that I wasn't supposed to.
That's where you learned to be a defender, probably.
Exactly.
Right there, yeah.
And so after I went to high school at Athens, I went to community college. I went to Kellogg Community College and then transferred to the University of Michigan. And after graduating U of M, I moved to Virginia, went to law school down there at George Mason. Really loved George Mason. The reason I went there is I have an interest in economics, and so I just wanted to. George Mason is a very strong law and economics school. So my plan was to graduate law school, get my PhD, and then teach. I had no interest in ever practicing law, didn't ever want to even be in the courtroom. But I got lucky. I got a federal clerkship up here in Ann Arbor with Judge Pape, and I worked there for 2 years. And then I came over and worked 1 year with David McKeague in the Western District, and I loved it. I really loved working for a judge. But I also still wanted to get my PhD, and so I then went to grad school at University of Michigan in their econ program. I disliked that greatly. It took about 2 weeks for me to figure out that was a mistake, but I did finish the year, and after that, I went to Honigman, where I practiced for several years, came back and worked with David McKeague when he moved up to the Court of Appeals, went back to Honigman after that. And then in 2013, I was commuting from Okemos to Detroit every day, and it was a grind, living in my car 3-4 hours a day, essentially. I did not want to do that anymore. And so I talked with David McKeague, I talked with John Pirich, I talked with others about how can I have a Lansing-based practice. And they said, well, it's a 2-company town, Michigan State and state government. And at the time, I didn't, working at a university wasn't on my radar screen. And so I decided to go back and try to work in state government. And I was lucky enough to be hired to be the general counsel for the House of Representatives. And I did that for several years. I became Speaker Cotter's chief of staff for the last year and a half that I was there. And then at the end of 2016, I planned to go back into private practice. But then this position on the Court of Appeals opened up. I threw my name in the hat, and I was lucky enough to be selected, and I've been on the Court of Appeals ever since.
You bet. And selected by Governor Rick Snyder.
Yes.
And then won re-election, correct?
I did.
Yeah, great.
I ran unopposed, which is the best way to run.
It's the best way. I will tell you that, too. I was on the Hazlet School Board and ran unopposed, and I tell you what, that just really kind of sets things for you. That just makes it so much easier.
Yep.
Let's talk about your role on the Court of Appeals. And
Sure.
what does a day look like for you?
A lot of reading and writing. We, on the Court of Appeals, it's kind of a monastic existence. We have court 2 days a month, where we typically hear somewhere between 20 and 30 appeals over those 2 days. But the rest of our month is spent reading the briefs that the parties submit, reading memoranda that our research attorneys or our law clerks have prepared, and then reading over draft opinions or drafting them ourselves.
What is a day for you? The most exciting part of it. What do you like the best?
Oh, I love oral argument. I love being in the courtroom. I love talking with the other judges and talking with the attorneys. It's just, that's what I enjoy, is talking about the law.
What are some of the key issues that you're dealing with right now?
Not surprisingly enough, we've had a lot of COVID-related cases that the Court of Appeals has had to deal with. I think over the next coming year, we're going to see probably some legal challenges involving the redistricting commission. So those are two things that I think we're going to be dealing with for a little while longer. You're
on the ballot this November, and I suspect that you obviously have set your sights on the Michigan Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. What exactly does that mean for you, and what do you bring to the court if you get elected?
The work that we do at the Court of Appeals is very similar to what they do at the Supreme Court. And so I think I would bring to the court, a vision of the law very similar to Justice Markman. If he wasn't stepping down, I don't know that I would have gotten into the race. But I do think that we need to have a voice like his on the Supreme Court. And I do share his vision for the court. And so that's what I think I would bring.
Well, and I think it's interesting how people, they have journeys and that they, kind of end up coming together. And it's interesting that you have such a strong relationship with Justice Beth Clement. And now here you're running for the Supreme Court too. Talk a little bit about that, because you guys have kind of traveled the same kind of journey.
Yeah, it's been... I teach at Michigan State Law School, and I have 3 kids, and I tell my kids and I tell my law students, one thing you would never want to do in life is burn a bridge. And it's interesting, my first what I call W-2 job in high school, I had done work before that, but it was usually for a farmer or something, getting paid under the table. But my first W-2 job was working at Arby's in Battle Creek. And the owner of Arby's is Jim Tripp. Well, that's Beth's dad. And so I got to know Beth through that connection, through my cousin, who, it's a long story, but in any event, that's how I kind of got to know Beth. And I've known her for 25 years. And, when I was thinking about coming back, having a job in Lansing with state government, in addition to talking with David McKeague and John Pirich, I talked with Beth Clement, and I got some advice from her, and she recommended that I do this in the House, and I did. And she's been a great friend over the years.
I know that, as you, talk about you and your strengths and experience, you are an applying the rule of law kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And what exactly does that mean?
That has several components, but maybe the most important component is that you don't start at the end and work your way backwards. You start with, here's the law, and I'm going to apply these facts to the law, and wherever that takes me, that's the right place to go. But it also is somebody who's very strongly committed to our constitutional system that we have. We have 3 branches, and those 3 branches need to be separate and respected. And somebody who, when I'm trying to figure out what a constitutional provision means, I will go back and try to figure out what did it mean to the people who voted at the time, because I think that's the most important evidence of what the Constitution means. So those are some aspects.
You also have a pretty close relationship, a 40-year relationship with a friend of yours who's in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about that as well and how those two worlds have really kind of come together.
Yeah, it's weird. So I met Eric Decker on the first day of kindergarten. I was pretty shy, and he had been told by a mutual friend of ours that he needed to come up to me and say something to me. And see, he came over to me and said, do you want to be pals? And literally ever since then, we've been best friends. So it's been Eric Decker, but I got, there's a band of us, John Knowles, Todd Kinney, Scott Kao, Yoli Vello. These are just my best friends that I've known since kindergarten and first grade. But it's been interesting, Eric, we had this parallel path. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. Even if I wasn't sure that I wanted to be in a courtroom, I've always wanted to be a lawyer. He's always wanted to be a cop. And it's just interesting that that's how it turned out. And he's risen to the top of the Detroit Police Department. He's a commander there. And it's pretty impressive what he's been able to do. I know he works hand in hand with Chief Craig. He's worked with Matthew Schneider, the U.S. Attorney over there. He works with Mayor Duggan all the time. So it's fun to see someone like that where, we came from very humble beginnings to see him rise in his career.
Well, it is about that, and it's about relationships. I talk a lot about that on this podcast. And, you have mentioned several times this morning John Pirich and David McKeague. And I think that that's interesting about how they have mentored you and what that means to you. And you talked to me a little bit offline about you having the opportunity to pay that forward.
Absolutely. Whenever I've interviewed for jobs, when I was looking for a law firm after, when I was thinking to leave the house, they'd always ask me, what do you want? Where do you see yourself? And I said, well, I either want to be John Pirich or David McKeague. I either want to be the best government relations attorney in the state of Michigan, or I want to be a judge. And so, I was lucky enough to be able to be a judge. But I think it's very important. I've been the beneficiary of some fantastic advice, and I want to make sure that I serve as that same role. And so, I've worked with some fantastic attorneys that are much better than me. Hassan Beydoun, I've said over and over, is maybe the best legal mind I've worked with at his age. I've just been lucky because he's fantastic. Lindsay Vogelsberg, Shanda Greco, Bill Stone, Travis Weber. These are just fantastic young attorneys that I've been lucky enough to work with. And frankly, they've made me look a lot better than probably what I really am.
Well, and you know what? Maybe David and John would say that about you as well, that, you have improved their game. Let's talk a little bit about you teaching.
Sure. I actually teach 2 semesters. In the fall, I teach with John Pirich, government relations. And then in the winter, I teach a trial advocacy course that I actually inherited through David McKeague. His JA used to teach it, and I took over. So, yeah, I love teaching. I love interacting with the students, and it's fun to teach the material, but it's more fun to actually talk to them about what they want to do with their careers. Hopefully, I can give them some advice that might help them. And I know, several students we've actually had get fellowships and jobs at the House and Senate. And so any opportunity I can get a good, young, excited lawyer involved in our state government, I think that just makes our state government better. What
are the aspects of Brock Swartzle that people should know about as they look to November?
I think first and foremost is that I like to think of myself as a nonpartisan. I did work for Republicans, but once you become a judge, you have to set that aside. And I have certainly ruled in cases, for parties that people would not think would be aligned with the Republicans, and that's what we do. That's what judges do. We do our very best to fairly and objectively apply the law to the facts of a case. And that's what I would want voters to know most about. But I would also want them to know that, I take the work very seriously. I understand that for the litigants, this may be one of the most important events in their lifetime. And I take that to heart, and I will do my level best to make sure that justice is done.
What's the greatest part of the Brock Swartzle journey so far, or greatest life lessons that you've learned?
I mean, my family is the most important. I have 3 wonderful kids and a wonderful wife. I have, fantastic brother and sister, and my friends and family are the most important part of that journey so far. I've been able to, I think, accomplish a lot in my career, but at the end of the day, I've got my friends and family, and I don't really need anything beyond that.
Well, I will tell you that as you and I sit here and we have an opportunity to chat, and I want to tell you that your mother deserves a big pat on the back, because she has just done an outstanding job in raising a great son. And so you make sure that you tell her that I said that, but she's also going to hear you talk about how wonderful she is too.
Miss Judy would like to hear that.
Yeah, well, make sure that Miss Judy, she knows, okay?
Okay.
All right. My guest today has been Brock Swartzle. He is a judge for the Michigan 4th District Court of Appeals. Thanks so much for being on with me.
Thank you.
I want to thank my supporting sponsors: Marketing Resource Group, White Law, Dowding Industries, Governmental Consultant Services, AF Group, AT&T, and the Loomis Law Firm. You can connect with me at connectwithkb.com. Until we connect again, go live your best life. I'm your host, Kristin Beltzer.